Okay, in this video, I'm going to be going through some of the techniques and tools that we can use when creating artwork with drawing ink. Now, I've poured my drawing ink into an Old Spice container to use. I'm going to go ahead and try with a couple different materials. Now, most people's first bet would be to use it with a brush. So I'm going to go ahead, keeping it quite wet, and just draw a little bit. Now obviously you can get more control depending on how much you apply pressure with the brush. Different brushes create different effects. The next tool I'm going to try is a thinner brush. You can see once again, depending on how much pressure I apply, it changes the quality of the line. An old plastic fork. Okay. Once again, you can get some really nice, interesting lines. Here I am using a Q-tip. I'm going to go ahead and use a toothpick next. Toothpicks are really good for fine line work when you don't have access to a fine lining or calligraphy pen, which currently my classroom doesn't have access to, so it's very helpful. Another variation of that is a chopstick either side. You have the thick side. Okay. Got another type of fork. Applies different sorts of lines. I have a sponge. And last but not least, I have a large brush. Okay. Now these come in a variety of different sizes, these Hake brushes. They're really good for using with ink and they're very absorbent. And that gives you an idea of just some of the brushes you can use when working with drawing ink. Okay, so for this next part of the video, I'm going to be showing you two different ink painting techniques. One of the techniques is very messy and loose, and the other one, although it is loose, is more careful and considered. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to start with the really messy version. To do that, I want to block and to start the really dark areas and then start to add details with more refined tools. Now, I'm going to start with a brush. I'm dipping it into my dark black and I'm just going to start to work it out just kind of rough. All right. The whole idea with this is to imply what's going on, to not really suggest the reality of it. You're just trying to make quick sketches. One of the advantages of working with ink is because it dries so fast, it sort of forces you to make decisions and go with it, and leave things a bit messy. There's certainly things about this that I'm not happy with already, but that's okay. I'm going to see it through because I just want to get a rough idea of what's going on. Okay? Think of it like planning or sketchbook work. It was quite often used with ink. Now that I've got this sort of rough idea, I'm going to go in and refine it with more specific tools. So to start off, I'm going to start with a thin brush. I'm going to start building in some details. And I'm going to go ahead and use a toothpick for some more specific texture. As I draw in areas that have dried, I'll be able to pick up some of those details. But you can see that the ink blooms really well when it mixes in and creates unexpected effects. The more familiarity you have with this, the more you can come to understand and expect the results and develop a better understanding of how to use different tools to create the results that you want. It's really good for building up expression because it works so quickly and so rough. Okay, so this painting's taken me a little less than 4 minutes. It's just been very quick, but it helps me get an idea of the structure that I'm going to be creating. Now for my next one, I'm going to take a little more time. I'm going to use 2 shades. Now to create shades with ink, you just want to use a little bit of water. I'm going to try the same painting again, but this time I'm going to block in the medium grays first before I start applying some of the darker grays to give me a range of value within my image. Now what you might choose to do between layers is use a heat gun to dry things off. Okay, so I've used a heat gun to dry it a little bit, but I've left it still a bit wet because I do want areas to bleed and mix, but it was just a little too wet for my tastes. So now I've put my brush into the darker ink and I'm going to start to refine the image and create a little bit more definition within this piece. Now you can see that where the ink is touching wet areas, it blooms out. And that's one of the nice things about ink is those irregularities. So don't try to hide them. Okay, now I'm going to let this next layer dry before doing the final details. Okay, so now that I've been away for a minute and I've been able to let this dry, you can see that the black is dried quite gray because the ink that I'm using is a student quality ink. But now that I've done this, you can see the variation between black and gray and areas where the colors have bled and created their own colors and variations within the image. Now that I have these details, I can go in with a fine brush or a toothpick or something like that to create more detail within my drawing. So to do that, I'm going to use the pure black ink, and I'm going to go ahead and draw in some of those details. I think I did that. Those lips a little too high in this image. Kind of giving her an unnecessarily large chin. You can see areas where I haven't quite put the ink exactly where I needed it to be, made mistakes and so forth, but that is all part of the process of working with this material. And it's all about roughing it in and getting comfortable with quick drawings and things that are a little less precise, because sometimes while doing that you create something interesting, or sometimes you create something that's just no good, but that's okay. It's still a learning process, still part of the learning process.